All right. So yeah, continuing with the characteristics of equilibrium, he said that all the measurable properties should be constant. So in thermal equilibrium, temperatures become constant during equilibrium. It should be a closed system, because then you don't have things escaping out, and like if it is closed, yeah, the masses will be constant, the pressure, vapor pressure will be constant, so equilibrium can be established. So the third point, this is again important for understanding of equilibrium. Is it going to be a like, is the system going to be static, or will it still remain dynamic? So once equilibrium is established, um, will the processes still be taking place, or will the process stop? So if you're talking about thermal equilibrium, do you think heat is still exchanged between both the bodies, or heat exchange stops? Or if we come back to the case of evaporation, do you think once equilibrium is established, um, water will continue to evaporate and condense, or will that stop? What do you think will happen during equilibrium?
Ma'am, I think it will continue. So it's dynamic.
Yes. So during
In
equilibrium,
the case of the evaporation of water, yes, but in the case of temperature, it won't, right?
it will. Heat exchange
Or
will
will it
always
still?
occur. Yeah,
Oh, it will still.
yeah. So that's important. So equilibrium does not mean that process stops. This is universal. Whether you're talking about reactions or heat exchange or evaporation or dissolution, whatever it may be, equilibrium means the process is always dynamic. Now, because the conditions are the same, you can't measure, like it's not visible to you that, oh yeah, there is a heat exchange or that there is evaporation condensation. The net exchange is zero, but the processes is still taking place. Whatever is going in the forward direction is equal to the negative direction, the backward direction, which is why both of them cancel out and you can't see it. But the processes are always dynamic. Things continue to happen, just that they stabilize. It's equilibrium conditions. The processes are dynamic and stable. They'll just continue to happen as they have already done. Another thing, equilibrium is characterized by constant value of one parameter. So if you want to measure equilibrium, you need to take one particular parameter and that needs to be constant. Okay. So in the case of thermal equilibrium, you consider temperature and that's constant. In the case of chemical equilibriums, the concentration is constant. In case of evaporation, you measure the vapor pressure and that's constant. Okay. So usually measurable properties are constant, but which equilibrium is established, that is characterized by the constant value of one parameter. So if temperature happens to be constant, then that's thermal equilibrium. If vapor pressure is constant, then it is evaporation. Like this process, there is equilibrium being established that way. And finally, the magnitude of the parameter. So we're saying that it's characterized by the constant value of one parameter, right? So this particular parameter ka magnitude shows how far the process has gone forward, process proceeded. So it doesn't have to be like a central value. It can be either low or it can be high. So when is the equilibrium established? That completely depends on all the other external factors. But as long as that parameter is constant, it means that equilibrium has been established. Now, when like the magnitude of the parameter shows how far it has gone. So if we are still talking about evaporation, if vapor pressure is high, it means that a lot of water molecules have gone into vapor, which means that the forward reaction has gone uh, quite a bit. It has been completed quite a lot before equilibrium was established. But if the vapor pressure, like in this case, vapor pressure is the constant value, right? In this particular equilibrium. So if that particular value was low, it means that, oh yeah, equilibrium was established fairly quickly. So the magnitude of that one parameter, which is constant, shows how far the process has gone. Okay. So these are the characteristics of equilibrium. Main thing you guys absolutely need to uh, internalize, like for your understanding, is that equilibrium is dynamic. It doesn't mean that the process has ended. It means that the process is still going on, just that forward and backward have reached, like the rates are constant, which is why it's balanced. Another thing is that needs to be a closed system, and another thing is that constant value of one parameter. So magnitude can be anything. The only condition is that needs to be constant. So these are the things you guys need to remember about equilibrium.
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
So these 5 pointers that we have, these 5 characteristics,
Hmm.
they're universal to every type of equilibrium or just physical equilibrium?
So usually characteristic of physical equilibrium, minor changes, but these particular points that I highlighted, that they are universal to every type of equilibrium.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some examples with respect to equilibrium. So we'll see how how to identify those parameters and all those things. Um, so evaporation, like liquid to vapor equilibrium evaporation, I've already discussed. Vapor pressure is the constant parameter at a given temperature. If the temperature changes, then of course all the other parameters also change. Similarly, there will be an equilibrium established in the case of sublimation also. Um, Camphor is a sublimate, like it's a sublimating solid. Sublimation means conversion between solid to gas. So again, that also has an equilibrium established. In the case of sublimation, reverse process, deposition, the constant parameter is the concentration. So you can also use partial pressure to as a way to measure the concentration, basically, in the vapor state, that way. Another example of physical equilibrium is dissolution. So dissolution of solids in liquids. This is actually a very good example to observe. Um, so let's say you're dissolving salt in water. Okay. So you take a certain, like, you take some amount of water Then you put some salt or sugar in it, any solid of your choice, and you stir it, and this basically dissolves into the liquid. Okay. Now, if you keep adding sugar or salt, like if you keep adding the solute to the point where it doesn't dissolve anymore, what do you think happens?
The
What did
liquid is saturated.
correct? So you have created a
Can
saturated
no more,
solution.
no more solid can dissolve, right?
Yeah, no more solid can dissolve. So that's a saturated solution. Now, what kind? Okay, so I am telling you that if you add more solute to a saturated solution of the solute in liquid, there is an equilibrium being established in this case. What is the equilibrium being established between?
Ma'am, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So if you add more solute to a saturated solution, so you have some solute in the solution and you have some solute down here at the bottom, because these cannot get dissolved anymore. So I'm telling that there is an equilibrium being established in this situation. So can you identify what is that equilibrium between? Like in the
Ma'am, the equilibrium is between the solid particles and the saturated solution.
The ratio maybe, or concentration of how much solvent there is, solute there is in the solvent.
very good. Tarannum and Mitali, you guys got it. So even though you can't see any more solute dissolving, there is still equilibrium established. So if I take this to be a salt solution, the salt that is already dissolved, aqueous salt, is in equilibrium with the salt that is not dissolved, solid. So this is what the this is the equilibrium that it's established. So even though the net result you see that, oh, nothing else is getting dissolved, that is not true. So whatever sugar you add is still getting dissolved, just that whatever was already dissolved is coming back as a solid because there's no more place. So that way a dynamic equilibrium is established. And as Mitali said, the parameter that's constant is the concentration of the solute in the solution. Okay. So I think in your textbook, there was an experiment given to describe this, how they figured that, how can you figure out that there is an equilibrium that's being established in this situation is that you take some you take a regular salt solution, like regular sugar solution, and then you take some radioactive sugar. So use deuterium instead of regular hydrogen, or sugar that contains C14 instead of C12. So you use radioactive sugar. Then they observed that on adding the extra radioactive sugar, that was still going into the solution, and some of the solid sugar that was left outside undissolved consisted of normal sugar. So that's how they saw that, oh, there is still equilibrium being established. The dissolution, like process of dissolving, is continuous, just that the reverse process also was taking place. Okay. Similarly, there is an equilibrium established for a dissolution of gases in liquids. That is the reason your fizzy drinks stay fizzy. So the conditions under which the CO2 is dissolved in the bottle, it is under a highly pressurized condition, right? So under those particular conditions of pressure, um, the equilibrium, like the equilibrium is achieved. So there is a constant amount of CO2 gas that is dissolved. And once you unlock that bottle, once you open that bottle, the pressure decreases, which is why the equilibrium is disturbed and you lose all the CO2, you lose all the fizz. Okay. So with respect to dissolution of gases and liquids, there is an important law. It's called Henry's law. It states that the mass of a gas dissolved is directly proportional to the pressure of the gas above the solvent. So if I take the same example of a soft drink, you're dissolving CO2 in the soft drink, right? So if you increase the pressure of CO2 above the soft drink, more pressure means greater amount of CO2 can be dissolved in the soft drink. Okay. So mass of the gas that is dissolved in a liquid is directly proportional to the pressure of the gas above the solvent. So in place of the proportionality sign, if I want to make this an equality, introduce the constant of proportionality. So M is equal to KHP, where KH is called Henry's law constant. So this particular constant only depends on the temperature. It doesn't depend, it's a constant of proportionality and it only changes with temperature. Otherwise, it's a constant at a given temperature. Okay. So an application of Henry's law is in the case of deep sea divers. So deep sea divers, they carry oxygen tanks, right? Scuba divers. So they carry oxygen tanks for breathing. So instead of like normal atmosphere, may you have a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen, and in order to maintain that particular pressure and for the breathing conditions, usually oxygen tanks are not pure oxygen. They contain, it's a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen. But in the case of deep sea divers, they don't carry nitrogen, they carry helium instead of nitrogen. It's a mixture of helium and oxygen. Why is that?
Helium is lighter than nitrogen.
And that would be a problem for deep sea divers, right? Deep sea divers want to go deeper into the sea, but if they carry helium, just because it was lighter, that's going to get them upwards. They won't be able to dive deeper. Yet they carry helium. Why? They don't want to carry nitrogen. So what's the difference between surface and deep sea?
The amount of pressure acting on the scuba diver.
Correct. And since we're studying about Henry's law, what does it say? As pressure increases, what happens? So deep sea may you have higher pressure compared to surface level. And according to Henry's law, what does Henry's law say? This is the relation.
Mass is directly proportional to pressure.
Yeah. So what mass is this? So as pressure increases, as you go underwater, what happens?
They use helium because they want the pressure acting on the scuba diver to be less, where if they use nitrogen it'll be more. and that could be dangerous for the scuba diver.
Kind of, but not exactly. So you're close, like it's related to pressure, and helium behaves differently to nitrogen under high pressure condition. So the deal is that under the high pressures, like the kind of pressures you'll be dealing with underwater, nitrogen has higher solubility in blood than it does on the atmospheric pressure, which is why on the surface, even when you go swim in pools and all, it's not an issue. But when you're going uh, deep sea diving, the pressure is too much that the nitrogen starts dissolving in blood, and that's not okay. Like that harms the body, like that poisons us. Nitrogen is not meant to be breathed in, like you can't absorb nitrogen in the blood. But helium doesn't have such a problem. Like helium, uh, it doesn't hit those solubility levels even at that pressure, which is why using nitrogen is avoided. So instead of nitrogen, deep sea divers use helium. Yeah. So this is a kind of question that you might get under give reasons, or the for 2 marks or 1 mark, you're going to get these kind of questions. Why do deep sea divers use a mixture of helium and oxygen instead of nitrogen? So the reason relates to Henry's law. So deep sea diving means the divers are going to face extremely high pressures. So according to Henry's law, as the pressure increases, the mass of the gas that dissolves in the solvent also increases. So under these high pressures, nitrogen's solubility into the blood increases, which basically harms the divers. So to prevent this, divers use a mixture of helium and oxygen. Okay, got it? Yeah, got it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Now coming to chemical equilibrium. So equilibrium, again, just like physical equilibrium, there is one parameter that's constant and it's dynamic. Physical equilibrium is basically, we saw equilibrium in physical processes like evaporation, condensation, sublimation, dissolution, like dissolving and all that. Now apply the same concept to chemical reactions. So chemical equilibrium is established usually only in the case of reversible reactions. So what do you mean by reversible reactions?
So if you take A and B as reactants, A and B form to give C and C and D break down to give A and B back.
Correct. Yeah. So C and D also give A and B back when both of these happen simultaneously. So this sort of a reaction is called reversible reaction. Like you shouldn't have to change the reaction conditions for the opposite reaction to take place. So such reactions are called reversible reactions. Okay. Um, Another thing that you guys must know is rate of reaction. What do you mean by rate of reaction? What do you mean by rate? Rate in any context?
Rate of reaction is not a value, but like how fast how fast A and B form combine to give C and D, and how quickly C and D break down to give A and B back. So like,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. So how quickly the reaction happens is the rate of reaction. And Mitali, one thing, rate of reaction is absolutely a particular value. It is something that you can measure easily. So it's
Oh,
basically,
okay,
yeah.
sorry.
Okay, so it's basically change from here to here with respect to time, or change from, like, whether it's products or reactants, whatever the reaction may be, with respect to time. Okay. So if you map the concentration, like basically during a reaction, it's the concentration of the reactants and products that changes, right? So reactants break down to give products. So what do you think will happen to the concentration of reactants with respect to time? What will happen to the concentration? If I were to draw a graph, what do you think will happen to the reactants with respect to time? You take X amount of reactants, let's say this much amount of reactants at t equal to 0. Then you start the reaction. So if you keep measuring the concentration,
Go down.
correct, it keeps going down, right? Like reactants are constantly breaking down. And what do you think will happen to the concentration of products?
The exact opposite.
Yeah. So at,
Increases with time.
correct. At t equal to 0, where should I plot the concentration of products? Somewhere here, or here, or here?
0.
0. So you start with 0, you don't have any products. But as the reactants keep reacting, at the same time, the products keep forming. Okay. Now, if I have to mark where equilibrium is, where do you think equilibrium is formed? Point
The
A.
point where both the graphs intersect.
Are you sure? A, B, or C? So let's.
Okay, no, C. Sorry.
So why do you think it's C and not B?
So when it's B,
Mm.
the reaction is still happening. It hasn't like reached like a point where it stops. Like, yes, equilibrium is not something that stops, but at least it should come to an equal value or something like that, right?
Very good. Absolutely, Mithali. So the reaction is still going on, like concentration of reactants is still increasing, concentration of, sorry, products is still increasing, reactants is still decreasing. But equilibrium means the rate of the forward reaction is equal to the rate of the backward reaction, right? Which means that as the reactants are breaking down, the products are being formed. The products are also breaking down and forming the reactants at the same speed, at the same rate. So basically, the overall concentration of the reactants and products are not changing. It is a constant value. Okay, so that's when equilibrium is established. So remember, for equilibrium, we wanted to have like one constant parameter. So that particular constant parameter is that the concentration of reactants and the products are all constant. They're all equal. Okay. So the point where, the reaction mixture ka concentration is always the same, that's when equilibrium has taken place. It's not when concentration of reactants is equal to concentration of products. They may be equal, they may not be equal. That is entirely dependent on what reaction you're doing and at what temperature and at what pressure. But as long as the like with respect to time, it should not change. Reactants can have an extremely high concentration and products can have extremely low, or reactants can have extremely low concentration, products can have extremely high. Like the numbers don't matter, just that the numbers should not change with respect to time. That's when you get chemical equilibrium. And numbers don't change with time when the rate of forward reaction is equal to the rate of backward reaction. Okay, so these are like the two main points of a chemical equilibrium. If you're asked to write the definition or explain what is chemical equilibrium, these are the 2 points you need to mention. The rate of forward reaction is equal to the rate of the backward reaction, and also the concentration of the reactants and products remain constant or do not change with time. Only then you have a chemical equilibrium being established. These 2 points. Okay. So based on this, like this, if you're asked to plot the variation in the concentration of reactants and products with respect to time, so reactants decrease, products increase from 0. Equilibrium is established when both of them are equal, like they are one equal value. It's like continuing it at a constant value. From then onwards, you have an equilibrium. As long as they're changing, it's not equilibrium. Only when they don't change, it's equilibrium. Okay. So based on this, what are the characteristics of chemical equilibrium? So point 1, so different characteristics. At a given temperature, so at a given temperature, pressure, concentration, density, the color of the reaction vessel. So all of these features remain same, they're all constant. Okay. So at a given temperature, all of these individual measurements that you take, all the measurable quantities remain constant. Another thing, reversible reaction, basically A plus B gives C plus D and C plus D gives back A plus B, right? So you can achieve a chemical equilibrium from either side. You can get the chemical equilibrium from either side. Matlab, you can take either A and B as the reactants, or you can take C and D as the reactants. But if, as long as the temperature remains constant, and if you do the experiment at like the same pressure, you take the same concentrations, all of these at a particular temperature, all of these will remain constant. So equilibrium will be achieved at a particular concentration of the reactants and the products. But you can start, like starting it, you can start from either side, you'll still end up with the equilibrium. Next, equilibrium. So addition of a catalyst. So equilibrium is, what do you think the catalyst will do? Will it change when you, like, will it affect the equilibrium? Like, is it going to, if you add a catalyst here, let's say some catalyst random P, do you think that the opposite reaction will be stopped, or the forward reaction will be stopped, or will it remain unaffected? Like, what do you think will happen on addition of a catalyst?
It will remain unaffected, right?
Yeah. So does the time at which you get the equilibrium also remain unaffected?
No, the time like reduces.
Very good. So equilibrium remains unaffected by the addition of a catalyst. So these values are still the same if you add a catalyst, but you get equilibrium faster. The only thing it's going to change is when you get the equilibrium. But the rest of it, the concentration of reactants and products, and what is the pressure, what is the color of this thing, all of that will be the same whether you use a catalyst or not. The only thing that changes is using a catalyst means you get to the equilibrium state faster. Next, just like physical equilibriums, even chemical equilibriums are dynamic. This is another universal quality of equilibrium, that everything is, all the processes are still taking place, just that because forward and backward are equal, they cancel each other out. So they're dynamic but stable. Next, the reversible reactions. This basically follows from point 4 itself. Because it is dynamic and because it is stable, it's going to continue indefinitely if the conditions are unchanged. So if you don't do anything, if you just like let that reaction, if you leave it alone, if you don't change the pressure, if you don't change the concentration, if basically if all the condition remains unchanged, the equilibrium is going to continue like forever and ever. That's what being dynamic and stable means. Stable means it's like settled. It's like, yeah, I'm happy with this state. So if that state happens to be the reaction equilibrium, then it's going to continue indefinitely. And just like with the physical equilibrium, the magnitude of the quantities indicates the extent to which the reaction has occurred. So we said that the concentration of reactants and products are the same, but they're same with respect to time. So if the concentration of reactants are extremely low, like you started with 1 m and at equilibrium it has become 0.1 m, and concentration of products has become like 0.9 m, then you know that you see that the reaction has mostly taken place, like it's taken place up to like 90% of, it has proceeded up to 90% and then it reached equilibrium. In other cases, you may get values like after forming 0.6 m of the products, reactants will remain at 0.4 m and equilibrium is established. So it's like almost halfway there and then the equilibrium has been established. So concentration remains unchanged, but the value of these concentration of reactants and products tell you how far the reaction has gone. It shows the extent of the reaction. Okay, so magnitude of the quantities, that is concentration of the reactants products, or maybe you can measure it by the partial pressure, indicates the extent of the reaction. So how far the reaction has gone before equilibrium was achieved, that way. Okay. Then we have types of chemical equilibrium. So you've got homogeneous equilibrium and you've got heterogeneous equilibrium. What do you think homogeneous, heterogeneous are on the like based on? When is it homogeneous equilibrium? When is it heterogeneous equilibrium? Yeah. Any guesses?
Homogeneous equilibrium can it be like the same type of, or the compounds are in the
Very
same
good.
phase?
Very good. Homo means same. So reaction mein what else can you measure to be same or different? Phase. So if all the reactants and products are in the same phase, it's called homogeneous equilibrium. Hetero is different. So if reactants and products are in different phases, it's called a heterogeneous equilibrium. Okay. So we'll do some questions based on this. I'll give some reactions and you guys tell me if it's homogeneous or heterogeneous. H2 gas plus I2 gas is in equilibrium with 2HI gas. So is this homogeneous or heterogeneous?
Homogeneous.
Everyone agrees? I want all of you to either tell your answer or ping your answer on the chat. Actually, I'll give you guys like 3-4 of these equations and then you can give me the answer. Ping your answers. Ansh, Triti, Ishita, Mayas. I need it from all of you guys. Very nice. So Mitali and Tarannum have sent first and second. Correct. I'm getting answers only from Mitali and Tarannum. What about
And
the
the
rest?
first and the second are homogeneous, the third is not, and the fourth is also not.
So fourth one, what would you like? Third and fourth, what would you put it under?
Heterogeneous.
Very good. Yeah. Ansh and Riti, I haven't gotten answers from you guys. Correct. So Mitali, Tarannum have all answered. So this is homogeneous. This is also homogeneous. You see that the phases are the same, reactants and
They
products.
have sent you the answers. I guess because my net is slow or something, it's not
Oh,
reaching or something.
acha. Probably that could be the case. Yeah. So liquid gas. So this is hetero. And solid gas. This is different. So this is heterogeneous.
Hetero.
Very good. Okay. Cool. Um, how are you feeling so far? You want to do some questions? Ha, Dhriti, now I got getting your answers. Yeah, it was a connection issue. Okay. How are we doing so far? Like, too much? You guys want a little break? Should we do some questions for a change?
Yeah, ma'am. Questions would be good, but like it will be theory based only, right?
It's going to be theory based, yes.
Okay.
Does this chapter have numerical? Because I don't remember doing that much numerical.
Oh yeah, lots of numericals based on ionic equilibrium. So that part is going to be numerical heavy. Ionic
And
equilibrium.
that is just putting in values, na?
Yeah, like once you get the hang of it, it's just putting values and doing the calculation. It's not going to be very complicated. It's just a little lengthy and information heavy. Yeah. Okay. Uh, under what conditions do each of the following equilibria can exist? So under what conditions, matlab, the equilibrium can exist if the concentrations are the same or if the temperatures are same. Like when are they going to be established? So the first is solid liquid equilibrium. So when do you find an equilibrium? Like what parameter should be constant for this equilibrium to get established? Now, under what conditions, right? So something that you can control. Like it's not what parameter defines that particular equilibrium. It's more of like, for example, vapor pressure, like liquid gas equilibrium can be established at a constant temperature. So if you change the temperature, then the equilibrium is going to shift. So you can establish an equilibrium at constant
Sorry,
temperature that way.
I didn't.
Yeah. So that way, first solid liquid equilibrium also is, you can establish at a constant temperature. So solid solution equilibrium, when is this established? You guys answer third and fourth. Yeah.
How are we answering
When
these
you
questions?
You can send it on.
when you
Yeah.
No, I mean, how do you know it is constant temperature?
Ah, that way. Okay. So what, like for solid liquid equilibrium, see, solid liquid equilibrium is basically melting. So when a, like when melting happens, what should be maintained constant so that the melting can take place? So think of,
That is, so we should increase the temperature, no?
huh, so if you increase the temperature, you're going to disturb the equilibrium. So the condition for equilibrium is basically constant temperature needs to be there. Similarly, for liquid gas equilibrium, think of evaporation. If you increase temperature, then you increase rate of evaporation. मतलब condensation कम हो जाएगा, so equilibrium gets shifted that way.
And how do we consider like solid solution?
Solid or solution के लिए what needs to be constant?
Is it concentration of the solid in the solution?
Correct. So solid solution matlab you're trying to dissolve some solid in the solution, and that's how the equilibrium is occurring. Now that will happen, like you can get that equilibrium if the concentration is constant. So if it is not saturated solution, agar concentration kam hai, then more and more solid can dissolve. So the equilibrium is like, there's not going to be an equilibrium because um, this particular process will be favored. Like solid to solution process will be favored. But if you want forward and reverse also to take place, then it needs to be a saturated solution. Matlab, the concentration should be fixed. So Mitali, you had it right. Fixed amount of solute and solvent. Basically, that basically is the concentration, right? It's the
yeah.
ratio of those two. that way. Okay. Similarly, gas solution equilibrium also. So Mitali answered it should obey Henry's law. It will always obey Henry's law.
Oh, so whenever you take both of them, okay.
Yeah. So as you keep increasing the pressure,
Okay.
going to increase this thing.
So this one should also be concentration, right?
Correct. This also should be concentration up to the maximum point. Only then, think of it this way. As long as there is space, you can keep pushing extra stuff in it. But once the space is filled to the max, once it reaches the point of saturation, if you push some in, then extra stuff will come out. Then the more you push something in, the more it's going to come out that way. So that is how that equilibrium is established. State and explain the law of chemical equilibrium. Theory based है.
When the rate of forward reaction is equal to the rate of backward reaction, only then chemical equilibrium is achieved.
Correct. Yes, that's exactly it. Rate of forward reaction is equal to the rate of backward reaction. Because it said explain, you just need to elaborate on it a little bit. You can talk about the concentration of reactants products.
Okay, ma'am.
Explain what is wrong with the following statements. Statement 1. Reverse reaction does not begin until all the reactants have formed. What should be the correct form of the statement? Yeah, Dhriti.
Until all the reactants have formed.
Until all the products have formed.
Products have formed. Reactants are already there.
Exactly.
Yes, that's exactly what it's asking you to do.
You need to find out what is wrong with the statement and
Okay. Sorry.
yeah. If more reactants are used, the equilibrium constant will have a large value. Oh, we haven't spoken about the equilibrium constant yet, right? So you can like skip this for now. Yeah. If we can make a reaction go faster, we can increase the amount of products at equilibrium.
That's not true.
It's not true. So how would you correct it? What should be the statement? What is wrong with the statement? Or yeah.
Instead of amount of products, it should be amount of reactants, right?
I mean,
No,
Because if
I
you
guess
the amount
if we
of
can make the
reaction-
reaction go faster, we can reach the equilibrium faster, but doesn't mean the amount of products has to increase.
very good. That's exactly it. If we make a reaction go faster, we'll reach the equilibrium faster. Like we increase the amount of products, but that just means that the reverse reaction is also going to take place faster. So basically, we reach the equilibrium faster. Okay. 7dB6. Under what conditions is the substance precipitated from its solutions?
when the solution is saturated. So the
Solution is
excess, so the excess solute can be precipitated and removed.
Correct. So abhi ke liye, theoretically we say it's a saturated solution. Eventually we're going to have mathematical expressions to figure out the conditions, the criteria. When is it a precipitate? When it's going to dissolve? Extent of dissolution, all of that. Solubility product. case, more like a case-based question. Something about cold drinks. They shake the closed bottle of the cold drink, open it immediately so that the cold drink fizzes out rapidly. One day, while learning Henry's law, they asked their teacher about fizzing of cold drinks. From his answer, they got satisfied. Okay, fine. Write the statement of Henry's law. You can say it in short.
Henry's law states that mass is directly proportional to pressure.
Yeah. You need to be a little more specific. What mass that does?
Could you elaborate? Could you just say the statement again?
Yeah. So, like, to remember it, yes, you can say mass is directly proportional to the pressure. So mass refers to the mass of the gas dissolved. So the mass of the gas that can be dissolved in the solution and is directly proportional to. When we say pressure, it refers to the pressure of the same gas, so of the gas above the solvent. Okay. So imagine this situation. You've got a container here. You've got your solvent here. So when you're trying to dissolve a gas, you're going to introduce it from above. So I don't know if you any of you have seen a soda press machine, soda stream, whichever. So what is that? There's a piston here. There is a gas that is there over here. You increase the pressure of the gas above the solvent, then larger quantity of the gas gets dissolved in it. So mass is directly proportional to pressure, yes. So mass is the mass of the gas dissolved quantity of the gas, directly proportional to the pressure of the gas above the solvent.
Yes, ma'am. Got it.
What reason would have been given by the teacher for fizzing of cold drinks? Why do you think fizzing happens when you open cold drinks?
Because the pressure isn't constant anymore. The system isn't in equilibrium.
Correct. So when cold drink bottles, fizzy drink bottles are shut, it is under
A
high
closed
pressure. Yeah, it's closed
system,
and
high
high
pressure.
pressure. Yeah. When you open the cap, you're reducing the amount of pressure. Like there's nothing keeping that pressure over here. Because pressure decreases, the mass of the gas dissolved also decreases. So the extra gas comes out in the form of fizz. Which gas is filled in cold drink bottles? This you guys should know.
Carbon.
Carbon?
They're carbonated.
Carbohydrate is a gas? Do you think bread is gas?
I said carbon dioxide.
Dioxide, yes. Sorry. Audio was a little off there. So carbon dioxide is correct. Is fizzing of cold drink, will it remain the same if the temperature is raised? If you open a can of gas, let's say during summer versus during winter, is the quantity of fizz going to be the same?
Ma'am, I lost my connection for a second there. Could you just
Ah,
repeat
saw
what
that. Yeah, so
happened
we're
in
doing, no, we just discussed third one, abhi we are on fourth one. Yeah, will the fizzing of cold drink remain the same even if the temperature is raised? Do you think the amount of fizzing, like let's say you open a can of Coke during summer versus winter, is it the amount of fizzing that you observe, will it remain the same?
If you increase the temperature, then the fizzing will increase, right?
Yeah, it's going to increase, so it won't remain the same.
Mm.
Cool. Values we can ignore because that's very subjective. All right, so rest of it we'll discuss when we do ionic equilibria and all of that. Okay, now coming to the main part, this is, okay, so we've got the law of chemical equilibrium, like the mathematical quantification of it relating to chemical equilibrium. And after that, we've got Le Chatelier's principle, basically application of chemical equilibrium. Cool. So before we start with deriving like the quantitative value for chemical equilibrium, there's something called the law of mass action. It was proposed by two scientists, Maximilian Gerberg and Peter Veitch. So law of mass action states that the rate at which a substance reacts. So rate at which substance reacts, matlab the rate of the reaction is directly proportional to its active mass. Okay. So the rate at which a substance reacts, basically the rate of a reaction. So rate of reaction is directly proportional to, for one particular substance, its active mass. So if you were to extend it to a reaction, like if you have like two or more reactants, then it's directly proportional to the product of all the active masses of the reactants. So what do you mean by active masses of the reactants? What those scientists called as active mass is basically the concentration of the reactants, the molar concentration of the reactants. See? So if you take like a drop of HCl in a liter of water versus 100 ml of HCl in a liter of water, the active mass of HCl that is available for the reaction is going to change, right? Because the relative quantity of both has changed. So what is meant by active masses is basically the concentration of the reactants. So rate of the reaction is directly proportional to products of the active masses of the reactants. Now, talking about active mass, if it is a solution, like I said, HCl solution, a strong solution versus a dilute solution, strong solution may you have a lot more active mass. But instead, if I take, let's say, something like solid calcium oxide, slaking of lime may. So in the case of pure solids or liquids, what do you think would refer to the active mass?
Ma'am, can you define active mass again?
So active mass basically refers to the molar concentration in the case of salts or acids or bases, if you're taking solutions of things, because there is a difference between 0.5 m of HCl and 0.1 m of HCl, right? How much HCl is there available for the reaction is going to change in both the cases. There is a lot more HCl available in this than there is in this. Whether you take 100 ml of the solution or 300 ml of the solution, It's basically the relative quantity of HCl with respect to the whole solution. So that's what is meant by active mass, like how much mass of the solution is available to for the reaction. Or for example, HCl ठीक है, like पूरा dissociate हो जाएगा. If you take acetic acid, this is not going to dissociate as much as HCl is, right? So the active mass of, even if you take same concentration, the quantity of acetic acid that is available for the reaction is less because degree of dissociation come here. The active concentration, like the effective concentration, is going to be less than what you get in the case of HCl, that way. So solutions may, okay, it depends on the dissociation and the concentration of the solution and all of that. But if you consider pure solids or liquids, what do you think will then happen to the active mass? In the case of solutions, you take molar concentration as the active mass. In the case of pure solids and liquids, you don't, like, what would you take as the concentration basically?
0
Zero? Matlab,
or 1. Like it will be a definite integer.
yes. So for pure solids or liquids, you are going to take the concentration as 1. Okay. It's not going to be 0 because the substance is reacting. 0 matlab you're not considering at all, which is not the case, right?
Okay.
It is taking part in the
Yeah.
reaction. It is affecting it. So you take it
Okay.
as 1, not as a fraction, because the concentration or density, like in the case of solids, how dense it is, right? Like the whole thing remains the same throughout the substance. Like if you have a chunk of calcium oxide, solid calcium oxide, this whole chunk is going to take part in the reaction. If you have powder, you don't have to consider, like the concentration is basically 1 because you don't have two different substances here. Okay. So active masses is usually the concentration. In the case of pure solids or liquids, the concentration is considered as 1 unit. So this is something that you have to remember for your calculations. Okay. And if it's a gas, like, yeah, so it's going to be the same. Now, coming to the law of chemical equilibrium. So let's say we have a reversible reaction with the stoichiometric. Yeah, Mitali?
Could you just go back to the previous whiteboard for a second?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Got it.
Yeah. So for the law of chemical equilibrium, let's say we have a reversible reaction A plus B with the stoichiometric coefficients gives C plus D. Okay. Based on the law of mass action, rate of a reaction is directly proportional to the product of the active masses, right? So let's write. So for equilibrium, rate of forward reaction is equal to the rate of backward reaction, right? So let's write the expressions for that. So rate of forward reaction, RF, based on the law of mass action, what can I write it as? Rate of forward reaction is directly proportional to
Molar concentration of A into molar concentration of B.
Yeah. Now you have A molecule or A moles of A and B moles of B, right? how do you take that into account? So that becomes exponential. So how this comes about is if you take only one molecule of each, A into B. Now we have like 2 moles of A, like it depends on both the moles of A. So it's basically A into B. If you have like 3 moles of B, it's going to be A into 3 moles of B. So similarly, if you had A moles of A, it's concentration of A raised to the power A, concentration of B raised to the power B. Yeah, so that's why the stoichiometric coefficients turn into the exponential powers. Similarly, rate of backward reaction is going to be proportional to
C raised to small c into D raised to small d.
concentration of D raised to the power small d. Another thing, I'm not sure if we have discussed this before or not, but I just want to tell you guys, every time something is in square brackets, it means concentration of that thing. Okay, don't write like curly brackets, don't use some other product, some other brackets. Don't think they're just brackets. Square brackets basically represent concentration of that particular compound. It's like a sign convention. So even if you come across any other formula or expression in which there is square brackets and there is some compound inside it, it's basically the concentration of that particular compound. Okay. Okay. So if we remove the proportionality, मतलब एक constant को introduce करना पड़ेगा. So rate of forward reaction is equal to, let's call that constant K, Kf into concentration of A on power B. Similarly, rate of backward reaction is equal to Kb into concentration of C and concentration of D. ये समझ में आ गया ना? बैकवर्ड के लिए CD/Q यूज किया हमने, फॉरवर्ड के लिए AB/Q यूज किया. That you guys got right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now at equilibrium, rate of forward equal to rate of backward. So RF is equal to RB, which means that Kf into concentration of A, concentration of B is equal to Kb to concentration of C to concentration of D. This should be D. Okay. So just rearrange this a little bit. So Kf upon Kb is equal to concentration of C raised to the power C, concentration of D raised to the power D upon concentration of A raised to the power A, concentration of B raised to the power B. So this particular ratio, now because rate of forward reaction is equal to rate of backward reaction, doesn't mean that Kf will have to be equal to Kb. So the ratio of forward reaction ka rate constant to the ratio of backward reaction ka rate constant is called Kc, which is the equilibrium constant. Okay. So rate of forward is equal to rate of backward, right? So because both of these are equal, in दोनों का ratio will always be constant. So that constant is called equilibrium constant. And mathematically, if you want to find out like what is equilibrium constant equal to, so that is nothing but ratio of the concentration of products upon ratio of the concentration of reactants. And as the term says, it is a constant. So it is always at a given temperature, it's always going to be a constant. So Kc depends only on temperature. It changes only with temperature. It doesn't depend on concentration of reactants, concentration of products. This is always going to be a constant. So even though the formula consists of concentration of reactants and products, equilibrium pe all these values are going to be constant, which is why Kc is always a constant and its value only depends on temperature. Okay. So I'm gonna write down the formula for this. So equilibrium constant Kc. C is mentioned because we have taken it in terms of concentration. So if it's a gaseous reaction, then we define Kp, which is based on partial pressures. Now that comes a little while later. For now, let's deal with Kc. So this is the formula for equilibrium constant. So this rest of the chapter, when it comes to ionic equilibria and like so hydrolysis of salts and everything, this is exactly what we are going to be dealing with, just that we look at it in different situations. Oh, what if it's a dissociation of water? Then you have a value for Kw. If it's dissociation of acids, then you have something called Ka. And for bases, you have something called Kb. It's just the same thing in different cases, depending on what reactants and products you're using. Okay. Characteristics of Kc equilibrium constant. One, it is a definite value for every reaction at a given temperature. Like if you take any reaction at temperature T1, value of Kc is going to be a particular value. It's a reaction constant, basically, equilibrium constant for that reaction. It's a definite value for every reaction. So again, it depends from reaction to reaction. At a particular temperature. So if you change the temperature, the value of Kc is going to change. It depends only on temperature. It's the main thing. Second are more of, consequences sort of rather than characteristics. Okay. So if the equation is multiplied by n, n being any number. So like for example, if I've got H2O gives H2 plus O2, 2H2O gives 2H2 plus O2. This is like a balanced equation, right? Now this reversible reaction is going to have a value of Kc associated with it. Now for example, if I multiply this equation by 2, what do you think will happen to the value of Kc?
Kc will be multiplied by n because the reaction is being multiplied.
So then K dash equal to n Kc.
Yeah, we could say that.
Do
K
you
dash
want to
would be
work it out
equal
and tell me what happens?
in terms of
Like put it in actual values. So in this case, Kc will be equal to concentration of H2 square into O2 upon concentration of H2O square, right? So if I multiply this by 2, what will happen to the stoichiometric constant? So based on that, put it over here.
Oh, so Kc will not be multiplied by n, right?
No.
Then because then the number of moles will change.
Yeah,
So with respect to that, your molar concentrations will also change.
correct. So what will happen to k dash in that case? Will it be multiplied by n, divided by n, added by n? Like what exactly? How will it change?
So the way you calculate Kc, so if you write like H2 the whole square, O2 raised to 1 divided by H2O, that bracket into n. That will be the only thing.
Into n?
Yeah.
So nkc? See,
Okay,
what is
now
happening to the new stoichiometric coefficient for H2O?
it's increasing by like it's doubling. Oh, 2 Kc.
2kc.
Right. No, I am not making sense, ma'am.
No, it's a simple substitution, Mitali. Let's go with this only. So our original equation we have multiplied by n. So basically it has become Na into A plus Nb into B gives Nc into C plus Nd into D. तो K dash क्या हुआ? Write a fresh expression, concentration of products divided by concentration of reactants. So what should I write here? K dash equal to concentration of C raised to the power क्या हो जाएगा इधर?
C raised to C.
नहीं, what happened to the new
C power
stoichiometry?
NC.
C power Nc, yes, nice.
Oh, NC. Okay.
Concentration of D raised to the power
ND.
Nd upon concentration of A raised to the power
NA and B raised to ND.
Nd. Now, how can you relate this to Kc, which is just raised to the power A, raised to the power B, and so on? So this I can write as concentration of C raised to the power C, concentration of D raised to the power D upon concentration of A raised to the power A, concentration of B raised to the power B, the whole thing raised to the power N.
Yes, ma'am.
Laws of exponents. So this is basically equal to what is the value inside the bracket?
Raised to N.
Yeah,
Kc.
Kc raised to the power N. So if I multiply the equation by N, like if the stoichiometric coefficients were increased N times, then my Kc is exponentially raised by N times. Because the way Kc relates to stoichiometric coefficients is exponentially, right? That is the reason it does not become nkc, it becomes kc raised to the power n. And this is the derivation. Similarly, if equation is divided by n, then what will happen to k dash? You can work it out, sir. Yeah, Mayas?
No, I think it was. I said under root, but
Basically under root. So it becomes kc raised to the power 1 by n. Something raised to the power 1 by matlab it's basically the nth root of that particular thing. Okay. Okay. If equation is reversed, so instead of a plus b gives c plus d, if I write it as c plus d gives a plus d, then what will happen to the equilibrium constant? So for a plus b,
Be 1 by Kc or
absolutely. Yeah, I write c plus d gives a plus b. Then again, equilibrium constant is always concentration of products upon reactants, right? So a plus b denominator mein hai. In this case, a plus b is gonna get to the numerator. So basically it's the reciprocal. It becomes 1 by kc. Okay. So these are like the different consequences or, like results from the expression kc. The formula is the same. We're just trying to manipulate it in different ways and see what happens to kc. So if we increase the stoichiometric coefficient by 10 times, so basically multiply this whole equation by n, then this gets raised by exponent n. And if we divide it, then the exponent gets divided by n. And if equation is reversed, so whichever is in the numerator gets to the denominator and denominator gets to the numerator. So basically this has become reciprocal. Okay, next. If two equations are added, then what will happen to their equilibrium constants? Then k dash equal to. So let's say we have a plus b gives c plus d. Iska equilibrium constant is k1. And we have p plus q gives r plus s. Iska equilibrium constant is k2. So when you add both these equations, what will happen to the equilibrium constant? So k dash is defined for adding both of them. So a plus b plus p plus q, reversible reaction, c plus d plus r plus s. So what is the relation between k1, k2 and k dash? Work it out and tell me.
so ma'am, that'll be K1 plus K2, and then further we'll simplify it by taking our molar concentration wala formula, right?
Yeah, it won't be k1 plus k2, but yeah, this is the added reaction, right? So
Yeah.
define k
So
dash.
it should be K1 plus K2, right? Okay, no.
Do
No,
it
no, no,
and
no.
yeah, no
Sorry,
guess.
sorry.
Do it and then tell me.
It's multiplied.
Very good. So K dash is equal to K1 into K2. So after class, you guys work it out, figure out how you get it. Like practice writing the equilibrium constants. Like this needs to be in your head how this whole thing works. Similarly, if two equations are subtract, if you subtract two equations, then K dash becomes
K1 divided by K2.
yes. Yeah, depending on which equation you subtract, like if it is first one minus second one, K1 minus K2. If it is second one minus first one, it's K2 divided by K1. Okay, next so this is something that we discussed earlier. So equilibrium is not affected by catalyst. So quantitatively, Kc equilibrium constant is also not affected by catalyst. It only depends on the temperature. So catalyst does not affect the values of the concentrations, and so the value of Kc itself. It only speeds up when you get the equilibrium. That's it. Only the speed of the reaction is changed, but otherwise rest of the values are not affected. It is only affected by temperature, right? So temperature dependence of um, equilibrium constant is something we had come across back in thermodynamics itself. So do you guys remember this equation? Delta G is equal to minus 2 point.
Oh, sorry.
Delta H minus T delta S, of course. So this
Yeah.
equation is kind of indirectly derived from that. So you get something called a Gibbs-Helmholtz equation. It's a differential equation um, of like it's a differential equation based on change in Gibbs energy. Like it's a little more complicated. It's a little more advanced value. But yeah, so this equation is basically derived from that only. So delta G equal to 2.303 RT log K, where K is the equilibrium constant. So just rearranging this a little bit, this gives you the relation between equilibrium constant and the temperature. Okay, so these are the characteristics of like the equilibrium constant. So it's a definite value for every reaction. It's like a characteristic of the reaction, and it's constant for a particular temperature. Its dependence on temperature is based on this formula. It's not affected by catalyst, only means that you get equilibrium faster, but does nothing to the values. And rest of the characteristics are all what happens if this particular value is changed. So if equation is multiplied by n, then Kc is raised to the power n. Divided by n, then Kc is raised to the power 1 by n. Equation is reversed, then equilibrium constant is reciprocal. If two equations are added, then their equilibrium constants, like if the equilibrium constant of the new equation is equal to the product of the first two, the original two equations. And if they're subtracted, you divide the equilibrium constants. Okay, so these are the different characteristics of equilibrium constant. So after this, we have equilibrium constant defined for gaseous systems. So for gaseous systems, you consider the partial pressure instead of, what do you call it? The concentration of the reactants. So that is why it kind of changes a little bit. Okay, the main concept remains the same, just that the formula changes a little bit. Like you consider Kp instead of Kc. to indicate that you're considering the partial pressure. Do you guys, so after this we have application of equilibrium constant, basically Le Chatelier's principle and what it helps in predicting and all that. Do you want to continue this tomorrow, or should we complete it today and start ionic equilibrium tomorrow? How are you guys feeling up to this point?
It's pretty good, ma'am, but I just have a doubt.
Yeah.
So you said two things are left. One is doing Kp, which is equilibrium constant for gaseous reactions or
Yeah.
gaseous equilibrium.
Gaseous so reactions that have consist of gases and they've reached equilibrium for gaseous
Oh.
systems. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I'll finish off for the gaseous systems, and application of equilibrium constant, we'll do it tomorrow, because that way I can extend the application to Le Chatelier's principle and then ionic equilibrium also. Okay, so right now we'll just discuss for gaseous systems. So gaseous system means basically concentration. So in gaseous system, so instead of concentration, we're going to talk about partial pressures. Okay. So the expression for equilibrium constant also changes accordingly. Like, because you have partial pressure, so if you have A plus B in equilibrium with C plus D, and all of these are gases, then equilibrium constant Kp is expressed as partial pressure of A raised to the power A into partial pressure of B raised to the power B upon partial pressure of C raised to the power C into partial. I did a huge mistake, you guys. None of you pointed it out. Equilibrium constant is always products upon reactants. So C comes upar and A and B come niche. Okay, so note this. Now, what is partial pressure equal to? So partial pressure of a gas is equal to, there's a formula for partial pressure. How do you calculate partial pressure?
This is using the ideal gas equation, right? PV is equal to nRT, where P is the partial pressure of the gas.
Yeah, PV equal to nRT basically relates volume with the number of moles and temperature and all of that. Now, like, let's say you have a mixture of gases. How do you figure out partial pressure of one particular gas? Like in the reaction vessel, you have a mixture of A, B, C, D gases. How do you define partial pressure of A alone?
Oh, the law of partial pressures. Where okay, I forgot. Sorry.
That's okay. Anybody else remembers? Kriti, Mayas, Taranum, Ansh?
Wasn't it like P1 upon
nRT by V.
P1
मायस अभी डिस्कस किया आइडियल गैस इक्वेशन के साथ रिलेशन नहीं है पार्शियल प्रेशर फॉर्मूला के लिए
RT.
नो धृति यू गो अहेड
And no, I'm pretty sure I'm wrong.
that is one formula that is actually correct. The one I was looking for,
The one I said, the one I said.
the one you said, yeah. So it's, so what you were defining was Dalton's law of partial pressure, which is basically total pressure is equal to sum of partial pressures of all these individual gases. The one I was looking for is basically partial pressure, if you had to find out of A, that is equal to mole fraction of A into the total pressure of the vessel. You guys remember this?
Ma'am, this is also Dalton's own thing only, right? If you
Yeah.
like when you move further, this
Absolutely.
is what I was talking about.
Uh, so this is what Dhriti was getting at, some of like Dalton's law of this thing. PV equal to nRT, yeah, but like this doesn't relate to partial pressure in relation with, the total pressure. But yeah, so this is the formula for partial pressure. That's equal to mole fraction into the total pressure of the vessel. So if you apply this equation to this situation, I can write this as mole fraction of C raised to the power C into mole fraction of D raised to the power D upon mole fraction of A raised to the power A into mole fraction of B raised to the power B. Because this equation, this reaction is taking place in the same reaction vessel, which is why the total pressure will be the same for all of them, using the same, basically the same thing. Partial pressure of A plus B plus C plus D is basically equal to the total pressure. That is why the total pressure gets cancelled between numerator and denominator, and you'll be left with the partial pressures, the mole fractions. Okay. So this is basically the equation or the expression for equilibrium constant in terms of like for gaseous system. So if it was done in solution, you consider the concentration of the reactants and the products. For gaseous system, you can consider their partial pressures or their mole fractions. Okay. Now, the relation between Kp and Kc. Now, here you see that even though the concept is the same, we have used a different variable for this. So this is not the same as Kc. Okay. So how are Kp and Kc related if they are not one and the same? All right. How do you relate pressure with concentration? So Kp is basically this, and Kc is basically concentration. Now you guys can consider PV and nRT. So from PV equal to nRT, what is the relation between Kp and between pressure and concentration? So I'll start off with PV equal to nRT. P is of course pressure. What is concentration? Like if you had to consider molarity, how do you calculate molarity?
N by V or something like that, right?
Correct.
I don't know. Oh,
Molarity is basically number of moles of the solute upon volume of the solution, right? So if I rearrange this, I get P equal to N by V RT. Now N by V is basically the concentration. It's number of moles upon volume. So I can write this as partial pressure is equal to the concentration into RT. So if I apply this to each of the species here, I get partial pressure of A is equal to the molar concentration of A into RT. Partial pressure of B is equal to molar concentration of B into RT. Partial pressure of C equal to molar concentration of C into RT, and partial pressure of D is equal to molar concentration of D into RT. So if I substitute the values, Kp is equal to partial pressure of C raised to the power C into partial pressure of D raised to the power D upon partial pressure of A raised to the power A into partial pressure of B raised to the power B, right? So instead of partial pressure, I'm gonna put these values, concentration ka values. So that's mcRT raised to the power C, mdRT raised to the power D upon mART raised to the power A into mBRT raised to the power B. So if I just simplify this, I can take RT out common. So I'm just gonna rearrange this a little. That's molar concentration of C raised to the power C into molar concentration of D raised to the power D into RT raised to the power C plus D upon molar concentration of A into molar concentration of B into RT raised to the power A plus B. So do you guys get why I did this and how I did this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
So the
ma'am.
final thing should be
Hmm.
Kp is
Mhm.
equal to Kc
Yes.
into C plus D minus
Yeah.
A plus B.
Yes.
RT C plus D minus A plus B.
C plus D minus A plus B. So that is basically, if I had to write a simpler way, Kp is equal to Kc into RT raised to the power delta Ng. Okay. So delta Ng basically refers to the difference of moles of the products and reactants, gaseous products and reactants. Because if it's solid, it's not gonna exert any pressure. You're not going to consider it's going to become one. If it's liquid also, you're not going to like consider the partial pressure for that particular this thing. So that is why it is important to specify that delta Ng, the difference in the number of moles you're going to consider only for products and reactions.
Ma'am, could you go back to your previous whiteboard?
Yeah, sure. So this is the relation between Kp and Kc here. So this is going by the assumption that all of A, B, C, and D are gases. Only then you have to consider C plus D minus A plus B. If any of them happen to be a pure solid, pure liquid, or something like that, you don't consider them, like the pressure, that particular pressure is not considered. If it's a solution, you need to consider their concentration. But if it's a pure solid liquid, their concentration also becomes one. So it kind of disappears from this expression.
Okay, ma'am, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So if you have noted this down, okay, this is a relation between Kp and Kc. We now know quantitatively what is the formula for equilibrium constant. So next class, we can start off with applications of Kc and Kp. So we can put some expressions, like we can write some expressions for different reactions. If the value of Kp or Kc are given, we can figure out what it means. So based on the value of Kc, you can figure out what is the direction of the equilibrium, like what reaction is favored, forward or backward, all of these different things. We'll do all of that in the next class.
So, ma'am, Le-Chatelier process is a part of chemical equilibrium.
Yeah, Le Chatelier principle. It's not a process. He just gave some principles to figure out if you change one particular parameter in the reaction condition.
The reaction and the other product.
Then what will happen to the reaction?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So Le Chatelier's principle and their application we're going to do in the next class.
Thank you, ma'am.
Understand? Okay. Cool. So tomorrow only, we'll meet tomorrow only with this.